The great hall of Ashara Prime had never been so quiet. Thousands of Cathari nobles stood in perfect rows, their bioluminescent skin glowing softly in shades of blue and purple. They watched as Princess Valera walked toward the crystal throne, her footsteps echoing against the polished stone floor. She kept her 4 violet eyes focused straight ahead, refusing to look at the faces that judged her with every step. Emperor Zorath sat upon the throne, his golden blood visible through his translucent skin, marking him as pure royalty. He loved his daughter more than anything in the universe, but today he had to do something that broke his heart. He had to announce her betrothal trials to the entire galaxy. Valera stopped at the base of the throne and knelt before her father. She was beautiful by any standard, tall and graceful with flowing silver hair that reached her waist. But she carried a secret that everyone knew, a shame that had followed her since birth. Her blood ran silver instead of gold. In the eyes of the Cathari, this made her impure, unworthy, broken. The Emperor raised his hand and the great screens around the hall flickered to life. His voice carried across not just the room, but across 1,000 worlds connected to this moment. I announced the betrothal trials of Princess Valera, daughter of the Crystal Throne, heir to the Cathari Empire, he said. His voice was strong, but those who knew him could hear the pain hiding beneath his words. Let all noble houses of the galaxy send their finest sons to compete for her hand. The message went out across the stars. It reached the proud warriors of the Vorlon Dominion, the ancient scholars of the Scytheran lords, and the wealthy merchants of the Trade Collective. It even reached a small blue planet on the edge of explored space, a world called Earth that had only joined the galactic community 5 years ago. For 3 weeks, Valera waited. She spent her days in the palace garden, sketching the flowers that her mother had planted before she died. She hummed old songs to herself when she thought no one was listening. She tried not to think about what was coming. The rejections started arriving on the 4th day. The first came from House Vorath of the Vorlon Dominion. We do not waste our blood on tainted vessels, the message read. Valera stood perfectly still as her father's advisor read the words aloud. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that crying only made things worse. The second rejection came from the Scytheran lords. They did not even bother with words. They simply sent back the invitation torn in half. By the end of the first week, 12 noble houses had refused. By the end of the second week, the number had grown to 25. The nobles of Ashara Prime whispered in corners and laughed behind their hands. The silver-blooded princess, they said. Who would want her? Valera heard every whisper. She felt every laugh like a knife in her chest. But she kept walking through the palace with her head held. Because that was all she could do. Her only friend in the world was a servant girl named Mira, who brought her meals and helped her dress each morning. Mira had served Valera since they were both children, and she was the only person who treated the princess like a real person instead of a problem to be solved. They are fools. My lady, Mira said one evening as she brushed Valera's silver hair. Any one of them would be lucky to have you. Valera smiled sadly at her reflection in the mirror. You are kind, Mira, but we both know the truth. My blood marks me as less than nothing. No noble house will risk their pure lineage for a princess with silver in her veins. The 37th rejection arrived on a cold morning when frost covered the palace windows. It came from House Cathari, the last noble house in their own empire that had not yet responded. Valera had held on to a tiny hope that perhaps her own people would accept her. That hope died with a single sentence. The House of Cathari regrets that it cannot participate in this farce. Emperor Zorath found his daughter sitting alone in the garden that afternoon. She was not crying, but her eyes held an emptiness that frightened him more than tears ever could. He sat down beside her on the cold stone bench and took her hand in his. I am sorry, my child, he said softly. I have failed you." "You have never failed me, father," Valera replied. "The universe simply has no place for someone like me." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke words that would change the course of galactic history. "There is one option we have not tried. The humans of Earth have recently been granted observer status in the Galactic Assembly. They are not considered noble by our standards, but they are also not bound by our traditions. Perhaps one of them might be willing to enter the trials." Valera turned to look at her father with confusion in her eyes. "Humans? Father, they are barely above primitives. They have only had space travel for a century. The other noble houses would be outraged." "Let them be outraged," the Emperor said, with sudden fire in his voice. "They've already rejected you. They have no right to complain about who accepts you. I would rather see you married to a human who treats you with kindness than to a Cathari noble who sees you as a burden." On Earth, in a gray building in a city called Geneva, a man named Daniel Carter was drinking his morning coffee when his computer made a strange sound. He was the lead ambassador for the United Earth Diplomatic Corps, a job he had fallen into by accident after first contact. Before the aliens came, he had been a high school teacher in a small town in Nebraska. He had taught history to teenagers who mostly wanted to be anywhere else. Now he taught humanity about the galaxy, and sometimes he taught the galaxy about humanity. His aide, Lieutenant Katie Morgan, rushed into his office with wide eyes. "Sir, you need to see this. The Cathari Empire just sent us an invitation. They want a human to compete in their princess's betrothal trials." Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. "They want what?" Katie handed him the tablet with the message displayed on the screen. Daniel read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. A princess. Betrothal trials. They were actually being invited to compete for the hand of alien royalty. "This has to be a joke," he said. "I checked twice, sir. It is completely genuine." Daniel leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. He thought about everything humanity had worked for since first contact. They were seen as primitives, as children playing in a galaxy of ancient civilizations. This invitation was either a trap or an opportunity. Possibly both. "Get me everything we have on the Cathari princess," he said finally, "and clear my schedule. I think I need to take a trip." The transport ship dropped out of hyperspace above Asha Prime, and Daniel Carter pressed his face against the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. The planet below was beautiful beyond words, covered in swirling clouds of purple and pink that parted to reveal cities of crystal and light. He had seen pictures during his research, but pictures could not capture the way the planet seemed to glow from within. "Nervous?" Katie asked from the seat beside him. She had insisted on coming along as his official aide, though Daniel suspected she mostly wanted to see an alien world for herself. "Terrified," Daniel admitted with a small laugh. "I taught high school for 15 years. Nothing prepares you for meeting an emperor." The ship descended through the atmosphere and landed on a platform outside the Imperial Palace. When the doors opened, Daniel was hit by air that smelled like flowers and electricity mixed together. A group of Cathari officials waited to greet him, their expressions carefully neutral, but their body language radiating disapproval. "Ambassador Carter," the lead official said in perfect English, "we welcome you to Ashar Prime. Please follow us to your quarters. The welcome ceremony begins in 4 hours." Daniel nodded politely and fell into step behind them. As they walked through the palace corridors, he noticed other figures watching from the shadows. These were the noble suitors who had come to observe the trials. Not to compete, but to witness what they assumed would be a humiliating failure. A tall Vorlon warrior with red scales and 4 arms stepped into Daniel's path. He towered over the human by at least 2 feet, and his eyes held nothing but contempt. "So this is the human," the warrior said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. I expected something more impressive. Tell me, little creature, do your people even understand what marriage means? Or do you simply mate like animals? Daniel looked up at the warrior and smiled calmly. We understand it well enough. Though I admit we usually skip the part where we insult strangers in hallways. Different customs, I suppose. The warrior's scales flushed darker with anger, but before he could respond, one of the Cathari officials stepped between them. The welcome ceremony approaches. All participants must prepare. Daniel continued walking without looking back. He could feel dozens of eyes burning into his back, but he kept his shoulders straight and his pace steady. He had dealt with difficult teenagers for years. He could handle a few arrogant aliens. His quarters were simple but elegant, with a bed that floated on some kind of anti-gravity field and windows that looked out over the Crystal City. Katie immediately began setting up their communication equipment while Daniel changed into his formal uniform. It was plain compared to what the aliens wore. Just a dark blue suit with Earth's flag on the shoulder. But it was clean and it fit well. I've been reviewing the information on Princess Valera, Katie said as she worked. She's 23 cycles old, which translates to roughly 28 Earth years. Her mother died when she was young. She has no siblings and few friends at court. And this silver blood thing seems to be a really big deal. The Cathari see it as a genetic defect, a sign of impurity. Daniel frowned as he adjusted his collar. That sounds familiar. Humans used to treat people differently because of things they couldn't control. Blood type, skin color, who their parents were. We like to think we have moved past that, but prejudice is hard to kill. The reports also say she is extremely intelligent. She has published papers on xenobiology and speaks 12 languages fluently. But none of that seems to matter to these nobles. All they see is the color of her blood. The welcome ceremony was held in the same great hall where Valera had knelt before her father weeks ago. Daniel stood at the back of the room with the other suitors, most of whom refused to stand anywhere near him. The Vorlon warrior from the hallway was there, along with 3 Cathari nobles who wore expressions of bored amusement. When Princess Valera entered the hall, Daniel forgot about everyone else. She moved like water flowing over stones, graceful and silent. Her silver hair was arranged in an elaborate style, decorated with tiny crystals that caught the light. She wore a gown of deep blue that made her violet eyes seem even more striking. But what Daniel noticed most was something that no one else seemed to see. She was exhausted. It showed in the slight droop of her shoulders when she thought no one was looking. It showed in the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. It showed in the small hesitation before each step, as if she was forcing herself to keep moving forward. Daniel had seen that same exhaustion in students who were being bullied. He had seen it in colleagues going through difficult divorces. He had seen it in his own mirror during the hardest years of his life. He knew what it looked like when someone was fighting just to get through each day. The emperor gave a speech about honor and tradition, and the glory of the empire. Daniel barely heard it. He was watching Valera, noticing the small details that told the real story. The way she flinched slightly when her silver blood was mentioned. The way she kept her hands folded tightly to stop them from shaking. The way she looked at the floor when the nobles laughed at a joke about her unique condition. After the ceremony, there was a formal reception where suitors were expected to introduce themselves to the princess. The other participants approached her one by one, offering gifts and compliments that sounded rehearsed and hollow. The Vorlon warrior presented a sword that had killed 1,000 enemies. The Cathari nobles offered promises of political alliances and expanded territories. Valera thanked each of them with the same empty smile, accepting their gifts with hands that never stopped trembling. When it was Daniel's turn, he did something that made the entire room go silent. Instead of bowing and presenting a gift, He looked directly into her eyes and spoke to her as if she was the only person in the room. "Your Highness, I do not have weapons to offer or territories to promise. I am just a teacher from a small planet that most of the galaxy has never heard of. But I would like to request a private audience with you, if you would allow it." The nobles gasped. The Vorlon warrior laughed out loud. A private audience? The primitive human was actually requesting time alone with the princess. It was unheard of, inappropriate, possibly even insulting. But Valera was staring at Daniel with something new in her eyes. It was curiosity, the first real emotion she had shown all evening. "Why?" she asked simply. "Because I would like to talk to you," Daniel replied. "Not to the princess or the heir or the political symbol. Just to you. I find that people are usually more interesting than their titles suggest." The Emperor leaned forward on his throne, his golden eyes studying the human with new interest. No one had ever spoken to his daughter this way. No one had ever looked past the crown to see the person beneath. "I will allow it," Valera said quietly. "Tomorrow morning, in the palace garden. We will talk." The nobles erupted in whispers and protests, but the princess had already turned away. For the first time in weeks, there was something other than emptiness in her heart. There was hope. Daniel returned to his quarters and found Katie waiting with a dozen questions. He answered them as best he could, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about a princess with sad eyes in a galaxy that had decided she was worthless before giving her a chance. He was thinking about how sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was simply see another person for who they really were. Tomorrow, he would have his chance. He just hoped he would not waste it. The palace garden was quiet in the early morning hours. Mist rose from the purple grass and curled around the bases of flowers that seemed to sing softly in the gentle breeze. Daniel arrived first, wearing simple clothes instead of his formal uniform. He wanted to look approachable, not like a diplomat on official business. Valera appeared a few minutes later. She had traded her elaborate gown for a simpler dress, and her silver hair hung loose around her shoulders. Without the ceremony and the watching eyes, she looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. "You came," she said, sounding almost surprised. "I said I would." Daniel gestured to a stone bench near a fountain shaped like some kind of alien bird. "May we sit?" They sat together in silence for a moment, listening to the water and the singing flowers. Daniel did not rush to fill the quiet with words. He had learned long ago that sometimes people needed silence more than conversation. "Why are you really here?" Valera asked finally. "Humans gain nothing from this alliance. Your planet is too far away and too primitive to benefit from connecting with my empire. So why did you come?" Daniel considered the question carefully before answering. "I read your research papers on the journey here. Your work on cross-species cellular adaptation is brilliant. You have a mind that could change the galaxy if anyone bothered to listen. But nobody talks about your research. They only talk about your blood." Valera stared at him with wide eyes. "You read my papers?" "All 7 of them. I did not understand half of the technical details, but I understood enough to know that you are not just a princess. You are a scientist. You are curious about the universe and how it works. That is something I can respect." For a long moment, Valera did not speak. Then she asked a question in a voice so quiet that Daniel almost missed it. "What do you see when you look at me?" It was a dangerous question, loaded with years of pain and rejection. Daniel answered it honestly. "I see someone who has been told her entire life that she is not good enough. I see someone who has learned to smile even when her heart is breaking. I see someone who deserves to be seen as more than a genetic defect." He paused and met her eyes directly. "What do you want, Your Highness? Not what your empire needs or your father hopes for. What do you actually want?" Valera opened her mouth to answer and then closed it again. Her brow furrowed in confusion, and Daniel realized that no one had ever asked her that question before. She had spent her whole life being told what she should want, what she should be, what she should accept. The idea of wanting something for herself was completely foreign. "I do not know," she admitted finally. "I have never been allowed to want anything." "Then maybe that is where we should start." The betrothal trials began the next day. The arena of judgment was packed with thousands of spectators who had come from across the galaxy to watch. Most of them expected entertainment, a chance to see the silver-blooded princess humiliated one more time. The betting pools heavily favored the Vorlon warrior, whose name was Commander Drax, to win all 3 trials easily. The first trial was the trial of strength. Each suitor would face the Cathari champion in single combat, and the winner would be judged not just on victory, but on how impressively they fought. Commander Drax went first. He was magnificent in battle, his forearms moving like a deadly dance as he traded blows with the champion. The fight lasted nearly 10 minutes before Drax finally pinned his opponent to the ground. The crowd roared with approval. The 3 Cathari nobles each fought adequately, lasting between 5 minutes before being defeated. They accepted their losses with dignity, which earned them polite applause. Then it was Daniel's turn. He stepped onto the arena floor in simple training clothes, carrying no weapon. The Cathari champion looked at him with something close to pity. This small, soft human would not last 10 seconds. The fight began, and the champion was right. Daniel lasted exactly 4 seconds before he was thrown across the arena like a toy. He hit the ground hard and lay there for a moment, staring up at the ceiling while the crowd laughed. But then he did something unexpected. He stood up slowly, wiped the blood from his lip, and bowed respectfully to the champion. "I yield," he said clearly. "You are the stronger warrior." I am glad that the princess would have such protection. The laughter died away into confused silence. No one yielded in the trials. It was considered shameful, a sign of weakness. But Daniel did not look ashamed. He looked calm and dignified, as if losing the fight meant nothing at all. In the row box, Valera leaned forward with interest. She had expected the human to be crushed and humiliated. Instead, he had somehow turned his defeat into something that felt almost like victory. The second trial was the trial of wisdom. Each suitor was presented with a complex political scenario and asked to make a decision. There was no right answer, only choices that revealed character and priorities. The scenario involved a border conflict between 2 allied systems. One system was rich and powerful, but it violated treaties. The other system was poor and weak, but had done nothing wrong. The suitor had to decide who to support. Commander Drax chose the powerful system without hesitation. Strength respected strength, he declared. The weak deserved their fate. The Cathari nobles all chose variations of the same answer, siding with whoever would benefit their own houses most. Daniel listened to the scenario carefully and then gave an answer that made the judges exchange confused looks. "I would support the weaker system," he said. "Not because they will win, but because they are right. Treaties exist to protect everyone, not just the powerful. If we only enforce rules when it is convenient, then we have no rules at all. The purpose of strength is to protect those who cannot protect themselves." One of the judges frowned. "But this choice would cost your house greatly. You would lose valuable alliances." "A crown means nothing if there is no one left to wear it for," Daniel replied. "What good is power if we use it only to serve ourselves?" The trial ended without a clear winner being declared. The judges were not sure how to score an answer that valued principle over profit. That night, Daniel received a message from Valera asking him to meet her in the garden again. He found her sitting on the same bench as before, but this time she was smiling. "You confuse them," she said. "I do not think anyone has ever confused the judges before. Is that good or bad? I do not know, but I enjoyed watching their faces. She paused and then added quietly, I also enjoyed watching you stand up after the champion threw you. Most people would have stayed down. Daniel shrugged. I have been knocked down before. Teachers learn to get back up quickly. Otherwise, the students think they have won. Tell me about being a teacher, Valera said. What was it like, teaching young humans? So Daniel told her. He told her about the students who did not want to learn and the ones who surprised him with their brilliance. He told her about the days when everything went wrong and the days when everything clicked into place. He told her about the feeling of watching someone understand something for the first time, the light that came into their eyes when knowledge became wisdom. Valera listened with fascination. She had never heard anyone speak about such ordinary things with such obvious love. You miss it, she observed. Every day, Daniel admitted. But first contact changed everything. Suddenly, there were bigger things to do than grade homework. Though sometimes I think the homework was more important than anything I have done since. Why? Because homework was about helping individual people grow. Diplomacy is about moving entire civilizations. But civilizations are just collections of people. If we forget that, we forget why any of it matters. The third trial would begin tomorrow. The trial of heart would determine everything. Daniel returned to his quarters and lay awake for hours, thinking about a princess who had never been allowed to want anything and wondering if he could give her the chance to choose. The morning of the trial of heart arrived with gray clouds covering the sky. It was the first overcast day since Daniel had arrived on Ashar Prime, and he took it as a sign that the universe was holding its breath. The trial would take place in the throne room itself, with the Emperor watching from his crystal seat. Each suitor would present a gift to the princess, something that revealed their true intentions and the kind of future they were offering. It was supposed to be the most important trial, the one that actually mattered. Daniel had spent the previous night preparing his gift. It was not impressive by galactic standards. It was not expensive or powerful or rare, but it was true, and he hoped that would be enough. The throne room was even more crowded than the arena had been. Representatives from 100 worlds had gathered to witness the conclusion of the trials. Most of them expected the Vorlon warrior to win easily. He had dominated the trial's strength, and his answer in the trial of wisdom had been exactly what a warrior was supposed to say. Commander Drax went first, carrying a massive weapon that pulsed with energy. He knelt before Valera and presented the weapon with obvious pride. This is the blade of conquest, forged in the heart of a dying star. It has claimed the lives of 10,000 enemies. With this blade, I will carve out an empire for you across the stars. Any world that dares to mock you will burn. Any enemy who speaks your name with disrespect will die. He stood and looked at Valera with burning eyes. I offer you power, princess. I offer you vengeance against everyone who has ever called you worthless. Together, we will make them all kneel. The crowd murmured with approval. It was a strong offer, exactly what the Cathari respected. Power answering power, strength proving strength. Valera accepted the weapon with steady hands and thanked the commander formally. But Daniel noticed that her eyes were empty as she spoke. This was not what she wanted. This had never been what she wanted. The three Cathari nobles presented their gifts next. The first offered a fleet of warships that would expand the empire's borders. The second offered territorial claims on 3 mineral-rich moons. The third offered a political alliance that would unite their 2 houses and create the most powerful voting bloc in the Imperial Council. Each gift was valuable. Each gift made strategic sense. And each gift treated Valera as nothing more than a political asset, a means to an end rather than a person. Then it was Daniel's turn. He walked to the center of the room carrying a small leather-bound book. It looked completely out of place among the weapons and warships and political promises. Some of the nobles laughed. What could a human possibly offer that would compare to fleets and alliances? Daniel knelt before Valera and held up the book. Your Highness, I do not have armies to offer or territories to promise. I cannot give you power or vengeance or political advantage. What I have is small and probably worthless by the standards of this room. He opened the book and showed her the pages inside. They were covered in handwriting, neat rows of observations and notes and small sketches. For the past 2 weeks, I have been watching. Not to find weakness or to plan strategies. Just watching, learning, trying to understand who you really are. He turned to a page near the middle. You hum when you think no one is listening. It is a melody I do not recognize. Maybe something your mother taught you. You do it when you are walking through the gardens, when you are reading in the library, when you think you are alone. He turned to another page. You sneak food to the servant children when the nobles are not looking. I saw you do it 3 times during the welcome reception alone. You hide bread rolls in your sleeves. It is not very subtle, but the children seemed to appreciate it. The room had gone completely silent. No one was laughing anymore. You spend hours in the garden drawing flowers, Daniel continued. Not the valuable ones or the rare ones. The ones your mother planted before she died. You sit in the same spot every day, right where the morning sun comes through the crystal walls. I think that spot makes you feel close to her. He closed the book and looked up at Valera. Tears were streaming down her face, but she made no move to wipe them away. I cannot offer you an empire, Your Highness. I cannot promise you power or revenge. But I can offer you this. He held out the book. I can offer you someone who sees you. Not the crown. Not the silver blood. Not the political chess piece that everyone else sees. Just you. Just Valera, the scientist who loves xenobiology, the daughter who misses her mother, the woman who has spent her whole life being told she is not enough. Daniel stood and spoke directly to the princess, ignoring everyone else in the room. You ask me what I see when I look at you. I see someone who deserves to be happy. I see someone who deserves to be asked what she wants instead of told what she should accept. I am not saying I am worthy of you, because I am not sure anyone could be worthy of you. But I am saying that you are worthy. You are worthy of being seen. You are worthy of being heard. You are worthy of being loved for who you are, not for what you can provide. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Then Valera spoke in a voice that trembled with emotion. You noticed the humming? It is a beautiful melody. You saw me feeding the children? They looked hungry. You look kind. You know about my mother's flowers? I know they make you smile. Real smiles, not the ones you give everyone else. Valera looked down at the book in Daniel's hands. It was such a small thing, just paper and leather and ink. But it held something that no weapon or warship could ever contain. It held proof that someone had been paying attention. It held proof that someone cared about the person beneath the crown. May I? She asked, reaching for the book. Daniel placed it in her hands. She opened it and began reading, her tears falling onto the pages. Each observation was written with care and attention. Each note showed that Daniel had been listening, watching, learning. He had seen her when everyone else had looked away. The emperor watched from his throne with an expression that no one could read. The nobles shifted uncomfortably, not sure how to respond to something so unlike anything they had expected. Commander Drax gripped his blade of conquest with white knuckles, sensing that his victory was slipping away. Valera closed the book and held it against her chest. When she looked up at Daniel, her eyes were still wet, but her smile was real. Thank you, she said simply. No one has ever given me a gift like this. No one has ever seen me like this. The head judge stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. Your Highness, we must now deliberate and determine the winner of the trials. Please retire to your chambers while we discuss. But Valera shook her head. There is nothing to discuss. I have already made my choice. The room erupted into chaos. The nobles shouted protests. Commander Drax stepped forward with his blade raised. The judges tried to restore order. But Valera stood perfectly still in the center of the storm, holding a small leather book and smiling for the first time in years. She had finally been seen, and she would not let that go. The chaos in the throne room lasted for nearly an hour. Nobles screamed at each other in languages that the translation systems could barely handle. Commander Drax had to be physically restrained by palace guards after he threatened to challenge Daniel to a duel to the death. The judges huddled together in a corner, trying to figure out what the rules said about a princess making her own choice. Through it all, Emperor Zorath sat motionless on his throne, watching everything with golden eyes that revealed nothing. Finally, he raised his hand. The room fell silent instantly. Even Commander Drax stopped struggling against the guards. When the Emperor spoke, his voice carried to every corner of vast chamber. Leave us. Everyone except my daughter and the human. Now. The nobles protested, but a second look from the Emperor silenced them. One by one, they filed out of the room until only 3 people remained. The great doors closed with a sound like thunder, and then there was only silence. Zorath descended from his throne, something he rarely did in public. He walked slowly toward his daughter and the strange human who had turned the trials upside down. When he reached them, he stopped and studied Daniel with the intensity of someone who had ruled an empire for 200 years. You have created a problem, the Emperor said. The noble houses are demanding your disqualification. The Vorlon Dominion is threatening war. Half of my own council believes that allowing a human to compete was a mistake from the beginning. Daniel met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. I understand, Your Majesty. I did not come here to cause problems. I came here because your daughter deserved better than to be rejected by everyone. And you thought you could give her something better? You, a human? A member of a species that discovered fire only a few thousand years ago. With respect, Your Majesty, the age of a species does not determine its worth. Humans may be young, but we have learned some things that older civilizations seem to have forgotten. We have learned that a person's value is not determined by their blood, or their birth, or their place in society. We have learned that the greatest strength is not the ability to destroy, but the ability to care. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his daughter. Valera, you understand what will happen if you choose this human. The noble houses will never accept him. They will use this as proof that you are unworthy of the throne. Everything we have built could crumble. Valera stepped forward and took her father's hands in hers. For 23 cycles, I have been your princess. I have been your symbol, your bargaining chip, your political asset. I have smiled when I wanted to cry. I have accepted insults with grace. I have done everything that was asked of me, and it was never enough. My blood was always wrong. My existence was always a disappointment. She paused and looked back at Daniel. But this man saw something different. He did not see a disappointment or a defect. He saw me. For the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw a person worth knowing. Is that not what you wanted for me, Father? Is that not what Mother would have wanted? The Emperor closed his eyes, a dimension of his late wife. When he opened them again, there was something different in his expression. The mask of the ruler had cracked just slightly, and beneath it was a father who loved his daughter more than his empire. Your mother would have liked him, Zora said quietly. She always said that the universe valued the wrong things. Strength when it should value kindness. Power when it should value wisdom. Gold when it should value silver. He released Valera's hands and turned to face Daniel. Human, Daniel Carter. Do you understand what you are taking on? My daughter is not just a woman. She is the heir to an empire. Our enemies will become your enemies. Our burdens will become your burdens. And there will be many in this galaxy who will hate you simply for existing. I understand, Daniel said. I also understand that your daughter has carried those burdens alone for her entire life. I would be honored to help her carry them if she will have me. The Emperor studied him for another long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his ancient face. You are either very brave or very foolish, human. Perhaps both. But my daughter has made her choice, and I will not take that from her. Not after everything she has endured. He turned and walked back to his throne, but instead of sitting, he stood before it and raised his voice in the formal tone of imperial decree. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that Princess Valera of the Cathari Empire has chosen her consort. Let it be known that Daniel Carter of Earth has won the betrothal trials, not through strength or wealth, but through something far more valuable. He has won through compassion. The great doors opened, and servants rushed in to spread the word. Within minutes, the news was traveling across the galaxy at the speed of light. The human had won. The silver-blooded princess had chosen a primitive from a backwater planet. The impossible had happened. The wedding took place 3 months later. It was broadcast to every world in the galactic community, watched by billions of beings who had never seen a human before. Daniel wore a simple suit from Earth, refusing the elaborate costumes the Cathari tradition demanded. Valera wore a gown of silver and blue, finally embracing the color that had marked her as different for so long. When they exchanged vows, Valera spoke words that would be quoted for generations to come. I was born with silver blood, and I was told that made me worthless. I spent my life trying to prove them wrong, trying to be good enough, trying to earn acceptance that was never offered. But you did not ask me to prove anything. You did not ask me to change. You simply saw me, and that was enough. Today, I choose you, not because you are strong or powerful or noble. I choose you because you taught me that I was worth choosing. Daniel's response was simpler but no less powerful. I was a teacher before I was a diplomat. Teachers learn to see potential where others see problems. They learn to find the light in students who have been told they have none. When I looked at you, I saw someone extraordinary who had been treated as ordinary her entire life. I will spend the rest of my days making sure you never feel unseen again. The reaction across the galaxy was mixed. The Vorlon Dominion recalled their ambassador and began building warships along their borders. Some noble houses declared that they would never recognize the marriage. Others, surprisingly, began to reconsider their views on humans. On Earth, there were celebrations in every city. Humanity had been seen as primitives, as children in a galaxy of ancient powers. But one of their own had just married an alien princess, not through conquest or trickery, but through simple kindness. It proved something that many had doubted. Humanity had something to offer the universe after all. In the years that followed, things changed slowly but surely. Valera became a champion for species rights across the galaxy, using her position to advocate for those who had been overlooked and dismissed. Daniel became the first human to serve on the Imperial Council, where he constantly frustrated the noble houses with his insistence on asking difficult questions about tradition and fairness. They had 3 children, each born with blood that swirled between silver and red, a new color that had never been seen before. The noble houses did not know what to make of it. Valera laughed and said that perhaps the universe was creating something new, something that did not fit into the old categories. Emperor Zarth, watching his grandchildren play in the garden where his wife had once planted flowers, made a final decree before he died. He declared that blood color would no longer determine status in the Cathari Empire. Worth would be measured by actions, not by accidents of birth. It was the beginning of a revolution, slow and painful and incomplete. Old prejudices do not die easily. But it was a start, and across the galaxy, other species began to look at humans differently. They saw people who did not have the strongest weapons, or the most advanced technology, or the longest history. But they saw something else too. They saw a species that looked at the rejected and saw value. They saw a species that believed everyone deserved to be seen. They saw hope. And in a universe that had grown old and cynical and tired, hope was the rarest treasure of all.